I'm Genevieve Randall, and welcome to the pre-concert chat tonight for this Lincoln's Symphony Orchestra concert titled Wherefore Art Thou, Anton? Nebraska Public Media is proud to support LSO with these chats as we all continue to find ways to share music together, and in this case, share a little bit about the music. Welcome also to Anton Miller, Rita Porphyris, and music director Ed Polachek. Great to see all of you.
Oh, it's great to be here. It's great to be back in the beautiful state of Nebraska. It really is. It's fabulous. And by the way, we're going to have to change the title now. It's going to be Wherefore Art Thou, Anton and Rita.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, speaking of changes, this concert was a little changed from the original plan. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Ed?
Yeah, not just a little changed. It was completely overall. See, the point is that this original concert was a large orchestra, all Russian music. And it featured the Glazunov Violin Concerto, also Romeo and Juliet excerpts from Prokofiev's ballet suite, and the Romeo and Juliet of Tchaikovsky. It was a big all-Russian program. But then when that little needle went into that red, we had to redo the size of the orchestra because we have to now be socially distanced, and so we have to reduce it substantially. And some people might say, well, with all that's going on, isn't it a shame that we can't do this or that or the other thing? But out of adversity comes really some spectacular, really wonderful blessings, actually. And the first blessing is that now it includes Rita Porphyris, who is just a top-notch, top drawer, as many of us know, and many of you, our listeners know, violist, and has soloed, of course, with Lincoln's Symphony before. And what it did then was, in order to do orchestra on a smaller scale or less numbers of players, it introduced me to some brand new music, and I am so excited about tonight's program. I just think it's going to be great.
I am excited too because there's a composer who is one of my absolute favorites on this program now, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay. So since we have here folks who might be watching in the hall or who might be watching via live stream and who may not know who Rita is, Rita, would you like to introduce yourself, or maybe Anton, you could introduce Rita?
No,
I'll let her do it.
No?
She won't let me do that.
I think it's great.
So hi everybody. I'm Rita Porphyris. I am a violist, and I am also Anton's wife. But I'm a violist.
Number one, she's a violist. And amazing.
Number one.
And we won't hold that. We won't hold that against you, Rita, really. We're going to welcome you. There are always these viola jokes that go flying around. She's also on the faculty, as Anton, at the Hart School of Music in Connecticut. And she's now, at the moment, just playing with just about every symphony orchestra across the country, which is incredible. She just did a stint with the Reykjavik, or is it the Icelandic Symphony, yeah. Icelandic Symphony Orchestra. So we've got like major talents here, and I'm thrilled. This is a great program to be part of.
Well, and part of this program is a double concerto by Johann Sebastian Bach, and I think just affectionately referred to as the Bach double, right?
Right, exactly.
And this is one of those pieces I feel like even people who aren't like true core classical aficionados, they hear it and they think, oh wait, I've heard this piece somewhere before. Well, how did you guys make the decision to do this in the way that you're doing it? You want to talk about that with this Bach?
Who wants to take that? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we during the pandemic last year, we had gone over to Maestro Edward Polachek's house in Baltimore and recorded this for, I think, the first virtual concert of Lincoln Symphony. Now, at that point, I actually hadn't played violin in 30 years. And somehow, pandemic rules, they convinced me, I don't know how, to take up that tiny little instrument, and I had to.
I was not the one that convinced her. It was Edward Polachek that convinced her, because he can convince anybody to do anything.
That's true. So anyway, long story short, I ended up playing the violin on that, and it was just the three of us in Edward Polachek's house, actually, and it was a very fine. It was a great recording. We had a great time doing it. And then we had to pivot. The question is, well, what can we put together pretty quickly that we already know? And that was one of them, of course. But there was definitely a need and time to put another piece on the program. And of course, I'm not a violinist. I used to be when I was younger. I am not a violinist. Like I said, 30 years have passed. So I said, okay, I'll play the Bach double again, but there's no way I'm going to play it on that tiny little baby viola. I'm actually the big viola, AKA the viola. And so I actually did a little arrangement of it for viola instead of viola and violin, because there's some things that, you know, could definitely work lower. And I think I'm going to celebrate that in this version you're going to hear tonight. Celebrate the bass part of my instrument.
And it works brilliantly. It's fabulous. It gave me a whole new kind of a take on this piece. This particular piece, the Bach double, is perhaps one of his most popular of all pieces of music. I mean, there's a lot of Bach that's really great, but this might get, you know, more play than just about any other piece, and probably has more recordings than any other of Bach's piece too.
Well, in addition to the Bach, it is just into February here, which is traditionally Black History Month, and lots of people are celebrating that. I would like to throw in that at the radio station, we've really made an effort to not just have it be, oh, here's a spotlight on music by Black composers, you know, during February, but all throughout the year. But it is really nice to kind of, like I say, shine a spotlight on a couple of
Right.
folks. And tonight we're going to get to hear some music by Samuel Coleridge Taylor. And what I was thinking about this composer is that, you know, when you mentioned Bach or Beethoven, some of those composers, I remember Wynton Marsalis saying something about um, some composers or performers in the telling of our musical history either being, you know, downsized or relegated. And it's one of those things that has happened to folks like Samuel Coleridge Taylor, where you say that name and people think, maybe I should know that. Kind of sounds like that poet's name. But what do we really know about him? So who wants to introduce this composer to us?
Well, I'd like to say a couple of things, because the piece that I'm going to play, the solo part, has a wonderful and rich history, and just even aside from sort of the historical kind of you know, oppression and the fact that you know, his name isn't a household name necessarily. It's like you said, it's sort of like, oh, I remember that. I think I've heard that before. But the piece is actually was originally going to be possibly the second movement of his violin concerto that he wrote for Maud Powell. And Maud Powell was a phenomenal violinist, American female violinist, who was really the first American violinist of prominence. And she was the one that premiered Sibelius Concerto and Tchaikovsky Concerto in the US. And she was just a huge star. And she actually, I think it's true that she met Samuel Coleridge Taylor in London at around the turn of the century, maybe a little bit before. And
we're talking the end of the 19th century going into the 20th century.
Right, yeah. That's exactly right. The late 1800s.
Right.
Yeah, this is all, you know, 100 years ago. Basically, they formed a friendship. And she was very interested in promoting music by Black musicians. And I think one of the things that happened was she was playing a concert in South Africa, because she was international. She played all over. And she was playing a concert in South Africa, and they wouldn't let Blacks into the concert. And she actually played from her hotel room. She played for people on the street. And she never forgot that. And then went on and you know, sort of tried to help promote this music. So it is interesting to me that you know, you have this Samuel Coleridge Taylor was really a household name during the turn of the century and in the early 1900s, and his music was, you know, lauded, and everybody knew it. Everybody knew his name, and, you know, internationally. And then over, you know, the last 100 years, that's disappeared. And so I think it's amazing that we're able to bring this back. And I love the fact that, you know, we're doing it. It's not a piece that I think maybe it was actually when it was first performed was Maud Powell played Coleridge Taylor's concerto. I think it was in 1911 or 1912. right before he died. And then the encore that she played was this piece that we're going to play. So it really has a wonderful history. But to me, it's like just an incredibly rich and fulfilling experience to immerse myself in that music and to be able to bring that to audiences and kind of remember where this was and what was going on. I think his name was he was bigger during that time than, you know, Elgar and Grieg and those kind of composers. Like, he was known worldwide. And then all of a sudden, you know, at some point that's lost. And I think to bring that back is really important because the music is wonderful. It's really fabulous.
And I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that I think is very special about Coleridge Taylor and this piece in particular, because I've just been absolutely I cavell when I listen to it, when I study this piece, is that, you know, in the effort to be finding music of lesser known composers of color, composers of different of female composers, et cetera, sometimes people lose sight of what the music itself is all about. I have to say that this particular piece is just so beautiful. It reminds me of, if you want to go back, you know, a couple of hundred years, the Beethoven romances, you know, going through to some of these Brahms pieces, going into Dvorak, the romance. I mean, it is so tuneful and so beautiful that I think the listener is going to be really surprised at and end up saying, why haven't I heard this piece before? You know, why haven't I heard this composer before? It's really very special.
Well, and with all of that history in mind, I think it's another layer of special that the title itself is "Keep Me From Sinking Down." So we're
based on a Negro spiritual. That's right.
Raising up that history and bringing back the name Samuel Coleridge Taylor here. Well, in addition to that and the Bach, one of my favorite composers, I am not going to lie, I was so excited to see the name Kenji Bunch.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, Kenji Bunch does dog rescue, so we know he's cool. I am a fan of that myself. But his music is just absolutely amazing. A current composer. Tell me about the piece that you're playing by Bunch.
Well, so
I'm going to let, I was going to say, I really want Rita to explain this because she knows him personally.
yeah, Kenji was a little bit younger than me in school. We all went to Juilliard, all three of us. And I knew him as a violist, but he was starting to compose even then. And, you know, it was clear how talented he was. And my favorite memories of Kenji are actually following him to some tiny little vegetarian, I don't even know if this is a thing anymore, but a vegetarian bluegrass club. I don't know, vegan bluegrass club. I remember it was vegan and there was bluegrass, and he had decided that he was going to teach himself the mandolin. You know, and he was playing, and he was just that kind of guy. He just loves all kinds of music, you know, every single genre there is, he's interested in. He finds a way to incorporate it into, you know, his own language. And when we were looking for music for this concert, I really actually just went to the American Viola Society database. And there's a database of underrepresented composers that I hit up all the time. And I just plugged in violin, viola, string orchestra, and this is one of the pieces that came up. And so I saw, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know he had wrote it. I know a lot of the other pieces that he's written, you know, I played some of them. And I immediately texted him and said, hey, so do you think I can learn this piece in like 3 weeks? He said, I'll have my publisher send you a perusal score. And we sent it on to Ed, and we just loved it. I mean, just even looking at it, it was so clear. And then, you know, in the introduction, in the program notes, he even writes that he does it as an homage to Bach and Mozart.
Right.
The title is,
go ahead.
The title is Verso, and verso, you know, meaning like across the strings. And so you have a lot of that, you know, very like violin, viola, crossing swords and crossing octave kind of things. And it's just it pays homage to all the things that came before, but all the things that will go forward.
It's a
wonderful, a little bit of fiddling in there.
Yes, there's
a lot of fiddling in there, and there's a lot of harpsichord. This is the crazy thing about this piece,
right?
Is that it's a tremendous partner for the Bach with the Bach double, particularly the way we're doing the Bach double with violin and viola, because this Kenji Bunch piece called Verso is scored for violin, viola, harpsichord. So it's actually a harpsichord solo. It's not just continuo, which scared the heck out of me. But and I'm going to do this. Well, we're going to do this because I had to learn it in less than 3 weeks too. But it's scored for those three soloists with all strings, and so it's identical to the Bach, but boy, is it ever so different than the Bach. It's a really great piece. It's a great piece. And it's a fun piece too. It's a fun piece to play, but it's also a fun piece to listen to.
Well, and I love the fact that we're doing Bach Double, which is one of the most played pieces and one of the most listened to pieces, and then we're doing something that nobody knows. And
that's right.
We didn't know
it
before.
It should be known. It's so great.
And we want it to be known because it's
exactly
wonderful.
Well, and I would encourage people to look up other music by Kenji Bunch as well. There's Alias Chamber Ensemble has recorded a number of his pieces, one called Drift that absolutely moves me to tears. The On Trio recorded some music too. So go on a Kenji Bunch, go down the rabbit hole with Kenji Bunch's music. It is worth it.
The second movement of this, I call it a little concerto, a mini concerto. The second movement will also bring you to tears. It is so beautiful, as does the second movement of the Bach. I think this is great. Yeah.
So now we've got Bach, we've got Kenji Bunch, we've got Samuel Coleridge Taylor. Some of these things will be a surprise for listeners to the concert, other things not. But there is one more surprise.
Nice. Yeah, it's a great surprise because it's a surprise symphony. And who wrote a surprise?
Wait a minute. What? We're doing what? No.
Yes.
When were you going to tell me that?
Well, I just changed it from Rachmaninoff Second now to the Haydn Surprise Symphony. And it's one of my favorites, I have to say. I don't think I've ever really played a Haydn symphony that I didn't fall in love with. And he only wrote about 104 or more of these things, but they are just such fun. And this one, he admitted, was a lot of fun and had a number of jokes in it. And we all know about the Surprise Symphony in the second movement, where it starts out very softly and delicately.
Don't ruin the surprise.
Okay.
There are fables about this, though, that there's a reason he wanted to surprise audiences. I don't know. I've read more than one thing about this. What story do you believe? Do you believe that Haydn wanted to wake up the audience because he didn't want them to sleep? Or do you believe that he was Ed's shaking his head? Because I've read other things about him trying to impress someone, or that he'd had these ongoing concerts in London and he was really trying to write something that was different.
Well, this is the second of what are called his last 12 symphonies. The second of the last 12 symphonies are termed the London Symphonies. And one of his students, Pleyel, was living in London at the time and had made quite a reputation for himself as a composer and as a performer. And when Haydn was presenting this is the story that Haydn himself tells, that he didn't want to be outdone by his student. So he wanted to show kind of the mastery of Papa Haydn, and the result was this particular symphony. Now, we don't really know much of the music of Pleyel, but we do know the music of Haydn. And the one thing that I do want to say in terms of the nickname surprise is that it's not only in the second movement where these surprises happen. There's another nickname to it, a German nickname called mit Paukenschlag, which means with a timpani stroke or a timpani beating. And that you're going to find out, particularly in the last movement, that whereas people begin to just kind of settle down, will also get aroused by it too. It's a fabulous symphony. Not easy. I don't know of any easy Haydn symphony, but this is one of my favorites. It's particularly.
Well, I am convinced that it's the sleeping one, because when I was 4 years old, my brother said to me, he was going to play a recording. He said, "Now I know you're feeling sleepy." And at 4 years old, I thought, well, I guess I am kind of feeling sleepy. And then he put on this music, and it was really nice and soothing. And I thought, oh, I should just go to sleep. And then all of a sudden I wasn't asleep anymore. So I'm sure that's what it's all about, because I experienced it as a 4-year-old.
This is great. I'm glad we have arguments on both sides of this issue because then the audience can decide when they hear the piece. This is good.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's
Comment
right.
later. Let us know later what you think. Who's right, Anton or Ed?
The maestro. Oh, never mind.
I know what the end of that is always right. I know.
Well, we have just a few minutes left before we get to all of this great music. So while we have Anton and Rita, I know, Anton, that I've had you talk a little bit about your violin before and the instrument that you play, but I don't think we've done that with you, Rita. And string players always have these interesting stories about their instruments.
It's like they're pets, you know. They it's like, you know, a second lover or something that's kept in a case away from everybody else. So I want to hear what Rita has to say about her viola.
Well, okay, so I'm a violist. I play the big girl violin. Hello. And my viola was made actually in 1831, and it's British.
Oh, British.
And I've had it. I must have had it. What year is this? I've had it for maybe about 20 years now, which doesn't seem like a long time to me, but I guess it is a long time to other people. And I love it. It's just it's a smallish viola. The thing about violas that's kind of different than most other string instruments is they come in all different sizes. There's not really a standard size. There's a lot of variation. There's a lot of variation in shape. And this one's on the smallish side because I'm vertically challenged slightly. And yeah, I love it. It's a beautiful little viola. And it's not about the instrument. It's the magic that's going on inside or in the player. So I've played on modern contemporary American violas, and I played on old Italian violas, and I like to think that I always sound like myself.
That's true. Yeah, that's really true.
Unless I'm playing the violin, and then I sound like I'm just cramped and
Not yourself.
That is not. I have to say that is not true, because your Bach double on the violin was
really good. Yeah,
it really was. I feel so fortunate and so privileged to be able to work with two such great artists. This is like old home week for me, and the family getting back together. It's great.
For us too.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
It is great to have you all here. I wanted to add, though, 1831, Rita, there's not a flutist who, for example, is playing a flute,
True.
In an orchestra from 1830, maybe 1980, but, or whatever, or a trumpet player. And does your instrument come with some sort of history that you know? Do you know who owned it before you? Because many of the violinists that we hear about, they often have a story about who played their previous instrument, where it was made, where it's traveled.
Yeah, strangely, actually, it is kind of strange that I don't know that, because I should know that, and it was very secret. I know it came from St. Louis, so if you're watching this and you live in St. Louis, I don't know. I'd love some information. I have no idea, and when I asked about it when I was buying it, it was not told to me. So it was kept from me even. So there's a mystery. Maybe we can figure it out.
What?
Well, and the other thing that's so interesting to me is that you're saying that about flutists and about flutes and age. That in when we're talking about string instruments, there's a whole era, and it's late 1800s, that's called modern Italian instruments. Modern, and that's 150 years ago.
Right.
that's
right, and I fall into that trap because I think of my viola as fairly new, fairly modern. 1831. It's almost 200 years old.
Amazing.
Do you know the name of the maker or the company?
Yeah, the maker is Fent, Bernard Fent, and I do know he was an English maker whose family actually were first instrument makers in Germany, but they moved over to England, and they worked with some of the greatest British makers of the time. And his thing that he did actually, and he is mentioned in all the books, this maker, a particular maker, his thing that he did was he copied Italian instruments. So he became famous for copying and making really great copies of Italian instruments. So that was his claim, and they sounded great even back then. So, and it's mentioned in books of the time.
Well, lots of things to think about and more mysteries the next time we get to talk to you. We'll see if you found anything else out about your viola. We've been talking here with Rita Porphyris, her husband, also LSO concert master Anton Miller, and music director Ed Polachek. So excited to hear this concert tonight titled Wherefore Art Thou, Anton. and Rita,
And
as I suggested we call this, with music by Samuel Coleridge, Taylor, Kenji Bunch, Bach, and Haydn. Thank you to all of you, and so glad everybody's here tonight.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
Thank
much.
you.
What a pleasure.